Bloodline Ranch, the war, a mother surprises. The Bloodline Ranch had been quiet when Medea arrived. Too quiet. She noticed it immediately. The men outside watched her carefully as she stepped out of the SUV, and even though several of them greeted her respectfully, there was something behind their eyes, something they weren't saying. Medea had come all the way to Montana because she'd heard her oldest baby was at war. That was all she knew. Her son was fighting to protect the Bloodline Ranch. Her son was in danger. Her son needed his mother. She didn't know the rest. She didn't know what had already happened. And Theodore Michael Castillo, 17 years old and sitting beside her during the entire drive, didn't know either. He only knew that his big brother was dealing with something serious. Medea had decided they were going to see him for themselves. Now, as she walked through the doors of the ranch house, she smiled. My baby. Her oldest son stood in the entryway. He was exhausted. His clothes were dusty. There were dark circles beneath his eyes. But he was alive. That was enough for Medea. She walked straight to him and pulled him into a hug. He stiffened for half a second before wrapping his arms around her. Mom, don't mom me. She pulled back and looked him over. You look terrible. I'm fine. You always say that. I'm handling it. I heard you were at war. His expression changed, only slightly, but Medea noticed. Who told you that? Does it matter? It does when you know how fast rumors travel. I don't care about rumors. She touched his face. I care about you. He sighed. I'm okay. Medea smiled. Good. She kissed his cheek. Then you're going to tell me what's going on. His eyes shifted toward Theodore. The teenager gave him an innocent look. I wanted to see the ranch. His brother stared at him. Of course you did. Medea smiled. He came with me. I can see that. And before you say anything, he's staying. Mom, he's 17, not 7. Theodore grinned. His brother shook his head. Fine. Medea walked farther into the house. So, she sat down. Tell me what happened. Her son remained standing. It's complicated. Everything with this family is complicated. It's a long story. I have time. He hesitated. Then he began. At first, he kept it simple. He told her about the threats, the pressure, the rival bloodline, the attempts to push them off their land, the attacks against ranch hands, the warnings, the escalation. Medea listened. She nodded several times. That's what I heard, she said, that they're trying to take your ranch. They've been trying. And you protected it. Yes. Her voice softened. That's what I expected you to do. Theodore sat quietly nearby. He watched his brother. There was something different about him while he talked. He wasn't boasting. He wasn't proud. He was simply explaining facts, like he'd already accepted every decision he'd made. Medea leaned forward. What did you do? Her son looked at her. What do you mean? To stop them? Silence. Medea's smile faded. What did you do? He looked away. Handled it. That isn't an answer. Mom, don't mom me again. She stood. I'm your mother. I know when you're leaving things out. Her son rubbed his jaw. Theodore suddenly became very interested in the floor. Finally, his brother spoke. I hit them where it hurt. Medea stared at him. What does that mean? Another silence. Then he said it. I burned their property. Medea blinked. Their property? Their land. Her expression changed. Whose? The rival leaders. Medea stared at him. You're telling me you burned down his land? Yes. The entire property? Yes. Why? Because he wouldn't stop. Medea took a step backward. Theodore's eyes widened. His brother continued. He threatened the ranch. He threatened my people. He kept pushing. So you burned his land? I sent a message. Medea's voice rose. A message? Her son didn't move. It worked. Medea stared at him as though she was seeing him for the first time. Did anyone get hurt? No, are you sure? Yes, you're sure? I made sure nobody was there. That answer somehow made it worse. Medea put a hand over her mouth. For several seconds she couldn't speak. Then she looked at the maps on the wall. The marked territories, the photographs, the names, the red circles. Suddenly everything looked different. She had thought her baby was fighting a war. She hadn't realized he had already become one of the men making the war happen. "And the CEO?" she asked quietly. Her son's eyes hardened. "What about him? The man who owns the rival company. He was part of it." Medea's eyes narrowed. "What did you do to his land?" "I burned it too." The room went silent. Theodore slowly looked toward his brother. Medea shook her head. "No." Her son frowned. "No, what?" "No." She pointed toward him. "You don't get to stand there and tell me you burned down another man's land like you're telling me you fixed a fence. Mom, you don't know what he did." "I know what you did. You don't know the whole story." "Then tell me." Her voice cracked through the room. Her son finally raised his voice too. "I was protecting this ranch." "And you think that makes everything okay?" "No." "Then why are you defending it?" "'Cause somebody had to." Medea froze. Her son breathed heavily. He looked toward the window. Beyond it stood the Bloodline Ranch, the land he'd spent years protecting, the home his family had built, the place he had sworn nobody would ever take from them. "I couldn't sit around and wait for them to destroy everything," he said. Medea's voice softened. "Baby." "No," he shook his head. "You don't get it." "Then help me understand. They came after us first. I understand that. They threatened my people. I understand. They thought because they had money, power, and connections, they could push us off our own land." His voice grew heavier. "So I showed them they were wrong." Medea stared at him. "And what happens now?" He didn't answer. "What happens after you burn their land?" she asked. Silence. "What happens when they come back?" He looked at her. "I'll be ready." Medea's eyes filled with tears. "That's what scares me." He frowned. "Why?" "Because you're starting to sound like you believe this is who you're supposed to be." He looked away. Medea walked closer. "I raised a boy who loved this ranch." She touched his chest. "I raised a boy who protected his family." Her voice trembled. "But somewhere along the way, my baby became a man who thinks burning another man's world is the price of keeping his own." He swallowed. "They would have taken everything. And now?" He didn't answer. Medea looked around the room. "The war is already inside you." Her son clenched his jaw. "You think I wanted this?" "I think you became very good at it. That one hurt." He looked at her. "Would you rather I let them destroy us?" "No." "Then what do you want from me?" "I want you to remember who you are." "I know exactly who I am." "No." Medea shook her head. "You know what you've had to become." She stepped closer. "I don't know if you remember who you were." Theodore sat frozen. He had come to Montana expecting to see the life his older brother lived. He hadn't expected to witness this. His brother looked toward him, then toward Medea. His voice became quieter. "I did what I had to do." Medea nodded slowly. "I know." She wiped her cheek. "And that's the part that's breaking my heart." He stared at her. "I am proud of you for protecting your family." He said nothing. "But I'm afraid of what protecting them is turning you into." The words hung between them. For the first time, her son didn't have an answer. Medea reached for his hand. He let her take it. "You are still my baby," she whispered. His eyes lowered. "But you're not a boy anymore." She squeezed his hand. "And I can't protect you from the man this war is making you become." Outside, a truck pulled into the yard. Men began moving again. The Bloodline Ranch continued as if nothing had happened. But inside the house, something had changed. Theodore finally understood. His brother wasn't simply fighting to protect the ranch. He was carrying every decision he'd made on his shoulders, every threat, every burned acre, every line he'd crossed, every enemy he'd created, and Medea had just become the first person brave enough to make him look at the weight of it. Her son released a long breath. "I'm sorry you had to hear it this way." Medea looked at him. "So am I." Then she pulled him into her arms. For a moment he let himself be her baby again, but neither of them could forget what he had done, and neither of them knew what the rival leader would do next, because the land had burned. The message had been sent, and now the Bloodline Ranch was waiting for the answer. The argument ended without either of them truly winning. Medea remained inside the house, standing near the kitchen window with her arms folded across her chest. Her son couldn't stay in that room another second. He walked toward the back door. Medea watched him go. She wanted to call him back, but she didn't. Sometimes a mother knew when her son needed space. The back door slammed behind him. Outside, the Montana air was cold against his skin. He walked past the porch and down toward the fence line, boots sinking slightly into the dirt. The Bloodline Ranch stretched out before him, thousands of acres, his family's home, his responsibility, his burden. He stopped near the fence and stared toward the distant mountains. A few minutes later, he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't turn around. "Thought I told you to stay inside." Theodore stopped. "I know." His older brother sighed. "You never listen. Mom says I get that from you." That earned the smallest smile. Theodore walked over and sat beside him on the wooden fence. For a while, neither of them said anything. The teenager looked across the ranch. Then he looked at his brother. "So," his brother glanced at him. "So what? What do you actually do here?" His brother raised an eyebrow. "At the ranch?" "Yeah, I run it. I know that. Then why ask? I mean, what do you actually do?" His brother looked out across the property. "I make sure the cattle are taken care of. I check the fences. I deal with the ranch hands. I handle the business side. I make decisions." "Every decision? Most of them? That's a lot." "It is." Theodore nodded slowly. Then came the question his brother knew was coming. "Do you do bad things to keep the land safe?" His brother went completely still. Theodore immediately looked down. "I heard what you and Mom were arguing about." His brother exhaled. "Yeah. Did you?" His brother didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked across the ranch. "Sometimes." Theodore looked at him. "What kind of bad things?" "The kind I wish I didn't have to do." "But you do them anyway, sometimes." "Because you're protecting everyone?" His brother nodded. "That's what I tell myself." Theodore frowned. "That doesn't sound like an answer." His brother smiled faintly. "You're 17. You're already asking dangerous questions." "I'm serious. I know." He rubbed his hands together against the cold. "Running this place isn't just about cattle and fences." He pointed toward the ranch. "Every piece of that land belongs to somebody. Every road, every pasture, every building has a history." Theodore listened. "And when you're responsible for it, people come after you. Why? Money, power, pride, territory. Because they want the ranch?" "Sometimes." "And you stop them?" "I will try." "Even if it means doing bad things?" His brother looked directly at him. "Sometimes protecting good people means making choices that don't feel good." Theodore was quiet. "Does that make you a bad person?" His brother looked away. "I don't know." The answer surprised Theodore. He had expected something stronger. Something like, "No." Instead, his brother looked tired. "Do you think you're a bad person?" Another long silence. "No." Then he corrected himself. "I think I've done bad things." Theodore nodded. "What's the difference?" His brother stared toward the mountains. "Being bad means you stop caring." He looked at Theodore. "I still care." Theodore studied him. "About Mom? Of course." "About me?" His brother smiled. "Especially you. About the ranch? Every damn inch of it." Theodore looked across the fields. "Then I guess I understand." His brother shook his head. "No." Theodore looked at him. "You don't." His brother's voice softened. "And I hope you never have to." Theodore sat quietly beside him. For the first time, he realized that his big brother wasn't proud of everything he'd done. He was carrying it, every decision, every threat, every line he'd crossed. The ranch wasn't just something he owned, it was something he had sworn to protect, even if protecting it slowly cost him pieces of himself. Theodore looked down at his hands. "Are you scared?" His brother laughed quietly. "Sometimes." "Of the rival?" "No." "Then what?" His brother looked back at the Bloodline Ranch. "That one day I'll become so good at protecting this place that I won't recognize myself anymore." Theodore didn't know what to say, so he simply stayed beside him. Two brothers sitting on a fence overlooking thousands of acres. One had spent years protecting the land. The other had just arrived to learn what that protection really cost. Inside the house, Medea watched them through the window. Her heart tightened. She had come to Montana because she heard her baby was at war. Now she understood. The war wasn't only happening around her son, it was happening inside him. And Theodore was beginning to see it too. His older brother stood from the fence. "Come on, where are we going?" "I'm going to show you the ranch." Theodore smiled. "Really?" "Yeah." His brother started walking. "But you're staying close." "Why?" His brother glanced over his shoulder. "Because around here you never know what tomorrow is bringing." Theodore hopped off the fence and followed. Behind them, Medea remained at the window, watching both of her boys disappear into the Montana evening. Part 2. By the time evening settled over the Bloodline Ranch, the argument between Medea and Caleb had finally quieted. Dinner was served late. Medea insisted on it. She had spent the entire afternoon learning more about the ranch, watching her oldest son work, and trying to understand just how deep the conflict had become. Now she sat at the dinner table between her two boys. Caleb sat at the head of the table as he always did. Theodore sat across from him, still taking in everything he'd seen that day. Medea placed another serving of food onto Theodore's plate. "Eat. I'm full. You're 17. I'm still full. Eat." Theodore looked at Caleb. Caleb shook his head. "Don't look at me. You know better than to argue with her." Medea smiled. "See? Your brother has sense." Theodore sighed and picked up his fork. Caleb couldn't help but smile. For the first time since Medea's arrival, the dinner table felt normal, almost like the war didn't exist. They talked about the ranch. Theodore asked questions about the horses. Medea told embarrassing stories about Caleb when he was younger. Caleb repeatedly told her to stop. She refused. "You were 6 years old," Medea said, laughing, "and you tried to ride a bull." "I was 6. Exactly. I was a child. And a foolish one." Theodore burst out laughing. Caleb pointed at him. "Don't encourage her," Medea smiled. "I have enough stories to keep him entertained all night." "That's what I'm afraid of." For a few precious minutes, Caleb wasn't the leader of the Bloodline Ranch. He was just Medea's oldest baby, and Theodore was just his little brother. After dinner, they cleaned up and finally settled in for the night. Medea took the guest room. Theodore was given one of the spare bedrooms down the hall. Caleb returned to his own room. The ranch grew quiet. The lights disappeared one by one. Doors closed. Footsteps faded. Outside, the ranch hands made their final rounds. The horses settled into the stables. The Montana night became almost completely silent. Caleb lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep. His mother's words kept replaying in his mind. "I'm afraid of what protecting them is turning you into." He closed his eyes. Maybe she was right. Maybe she wasn't. He didn't know anymore. But one thing he did know was that the rival leader wasn't going to forget what happened. Caleb had burned his land. He had burned the CEO's property. He had sent a message. And now he had to wait for the response. Eventually, exhaustion won. His eyes closed. Down the hall, Theodore was asleep. Medea was asleep. For the first time all day, the entire family was resting under the same roof. Then, bang! Caleb's eyes snapped open. Another shot cracked through the darkness. Bang, bang! Theodore jolted awake. Medea sat straight up in bed. What was that? More gunfire erupted outside. Bang, bang, bang! Caleb was already out of bed. He grabbed his weapon and rushed into the hallway. "Theodore!" His bedroom door flew open. "I'm here. Stay inside." Medea stepped into the hallway. "Caleb!" "Mom, stay in the room." "What's happening?" He looked toward the windows. The gunfire continued. Not random, controlled, coming from different positions around the outer edge of the property. Caleb's expression changed. He knew exactly what this was. Theodore looked at him. "What's happening?" Caleb didn't answer immediately. Another burst of gunfire tore through the night. Theodore flinched. Medea grabbed his arm. Caleb finally spoke. "It's the answer." Medea stared at him. "The answer to what?" He looked at her. "To what I did." Her face fell. The land? Caleb nodded. The fire. Theodore's expression changed. They're attacking the ranch? Caleb moved toward the window. Yes, Medea's voice trembled. Because you burned their property. They were always going to come. But you knew this would happen. Caleb looked back at her. I knew they'd respond. Another gunshot echoed, then another. Men could be heard shouting outside. Doors slammed. Boots pounded across the porch. The ranch was awake. The Bloodline Ranch was under attack. Caleb opened the door. A ranch hand rushed toward him. Boss, what do we have? Multiple shooters on the west side. Any breaches? Not yet. Get everyone to the safe positions. Yes, sir. The man disappeared. Caleb turned toward Theodore. You stay with Mom. Theodore nodded. Medea grabbed Caleb's arm before he could leave. You're not going out there. Mom, you just told me they're shooting at the ranch. I have to go. No, I lead this place. And you're my son. Caleb stared at her. Medea's eyes filled with tears. You just got me back into this house, and now you're walking straight into gunfire. I'm not going to let them hurt my people. They're already shooting. Exactly. He gently removed her hand from his arm. That's why I have to go. Theodore watched his brother. Caleb looked at him. Stay with Mom. But that's an order. Theodore nodded reluctantly. Caleb stepped outside. The cold Montana air hit him immediately. Gunfire continued across the property. Men moved through the darkness. Security lights flickered on. The Bloodline Ranch had transformed from a peaceful home into a battlefield in seconds. Caleb stood on the porch and looked toward the distant tree line. His jaw tightened. He had known the rival leader would answer. He simply hadn't expected the answer to come so quickly. One of his men ran toward him. Boss! Caleb turned. What? They're sending a message. Caleb looked toward the darkness. Another shot rang out, then another. He understood. The fire had been his warning. The bullets were theirs, and the war had officially reached the Bloodline Ranch. Chapter